I always went, I found the host that's good at one of the things that was on my list of 40. So that's the next show we're going to do. I always went by the host first, targeted who were going to be good hosts. And we had them audition by coming on my show as a guest, not telling them.
What does it mean to brand yourself as a network when you're only one show deep? And why would you bother adding a network bumper before you've even lined up your second or third podcast? These aren't the moves most podcasters start with. For most, network signals lots of shows, complex tech, or big collective. Definitely not a solo project from day one. But enter Glenn Hebert. He saw it differently, treating network branding as an intentional structure from the first episode, using it to actually shape listener expectations and attract future growth. Glenn's story started in a tiny horse world niche. Over nearly 2 decades, he took Horse Radio Network from a single show, branded a network from the onset, all the way to thousands of episodes, and eventually an acquisition. Along the way, he kept operations lean, standardized every show under a single umbrella, and grew relationships far beyond the barn, pun intended. I'm Greg Wasserman, the host of this amazing show, Podcast Network Insights. I've spent 15 years in advertising sales, and since 2021, I've been immersed in the podcast industry. As I believe life is about time and relationships, you never know where one conversation may lead. And I've built a lot of relationships and spent time with every kind of podcaster, from the solo creators just getting started to the heads of industry-leading networks like Glenn. If you've ever wondered whether joining a network makes sense, how these networks actually run, other networks you could join, explore joining, advertising with, partnering with, learning from, then my goal is to give you a behind-the-scenes look so you can confidently navigate whether you produce, host, sponsor, or run a network. As you listen, pay close attention to how Glenn operationalized his network thinking from day one, why he makes it core to his pitch, how it changes the way listeners and advertisers engage, and what makes it possible down the road, even if you're just one show. And of course, how this all helped him with an acquisition later on. The show wouldn't be possible with some of the amazing companies and sponsors, so I must say thank you. The show is produced by the incredible team, Stories and Strategies. If you don't know Doug and Emily, please reach out and learn from them. I'm using RSS.com for my podcast hosting because let's be honest, podcast hosting is more than just storage. RSS.com provides so many features to ensure a great podcast experience, making it easy to use, giving me maximum distribution, a community to learn from, monetization solutions, and so much more. Systems and processes are key for the consistency needed in podcasting, which is why I use Northflow, a dedicated podcast project management built by podcasters for podcasters. We all know the power of repurposing our content, turning these conversations into 100 pieces of content, which is why I use Cast Magic. It also helps me give my guests all the content that they need. Check out the links in the show notes and stay tuned after the interview because there's more to the conversation as I share some of my takeaways. With that said, let's get into the conversation. Well, Glenn, the show is called Podcast Network Insights. So I always like to start, first question, what does it mean to you when you hear podcast network?
Well, it's been my livelihood, of course, and my retirement. So for me, it's been a lot of things. And, I started a network when none of us knew what we were doing. It was back in, my first show was in 2006. We started a network in 2008. And I didn't know really anybody in podcasting. It was only a couple of years after that I met Chris Krimitsos and went to the Podfest. And I didn't know there was anybody else out here doing this. I was kind of just doing it on my own and making it up. So for me, I always knew I wanted a network. And I always knew that I wanted to start a network so that when podcasting became a thing, that I would have the number one network in the horse world for podcasts. Well, I didn't know that podcasting was going to take a long time to become a thing. And then that it was going to be, I was the only one doing podcasts in the horse world at that point. So I worked my butt off to get to that point, and I was, but I would have been anyway, is what it came down to. But I was really far ahead when Serial came out and people started finally figuring out how to listen to a podcast. And the horse world, they're addicted. I got the best niche in the world because people that when they're into horses, that's all they're into. That's it. They consume horses, everything. So I do have an easier niche that way, but they were also a couple years technologically behind. And they always have been. Now they're catching up now, and now I think they've caught up. But I was always fighting that battle where in other niches, people were listening to podcasts, and I was still answering the question, what is a podcast and what station is it on? So I always had that battle. That's why it's Horse Radio Network, because I didn't think the listeners, they didn't know what a podcast was, and it was easier to say it was online radio. So that's why I went with Horse Radio Network.
What made you then consider doing a podcast instead of actually creating a radio network or getting a radio show? Or did you even start with radio and then no?
No, I'm not good at having bosses. So I was a serial entrepreneur all my life, never good at having bosses. So I wasn't going to go work for a radio station. And I listened to this show called Twit, with Leo Laporte. And that's how I first learned about a podcast. And it was because of that show. And I said, well, he has a network. I don't know quite what that is, but I should do it. And, whatever Leo did, I did. And, we all copied from somebody back then because there was no guidebook. So we just figured it out and you just did it. And I just knew that, I started the network with one show for a year. It only had one show, but I still had that bumper at the beginning that said, this is the Horse Radio Network, because I knew I was training my listeners that there could be more shows coming. And that was one thing I did right, I think, at the very beginning.
So what does a podcast network actually mean to you?
It's a conglomeration of shows with similar interests in whatever form that takes.
And then it's an interesting one, whatever form it started off for you and on the podcast side. And I'm guessing it's expanded then beyond there.
It's still, we still have still a network of just horse shows. I started out owning all the shows when we first started, and then I would bring in other shows that were owned by others, and we would do advertising splits. So we had a multitude of different ways you could get on the network. I didn't, at the end, when I sold the network, I didn't own all the shows at that point. We had contracts with everybody. That's another thing I think I did right from the beginning is we had contracts for everything. So, everything was legally regulated, how it worked, who owned what, and all of that. But I was glad I did. I don't have any regrets for doing it the way I did. I didn't think I needed to own all the shows. And actually, it worked out better for me in the end, not owning all the shows, but being able to sell advertising against them. So in a way, everything I did kind of worked in my favor in the end. You don't know that at the time, right?
Of course.
You're never sure of that at the time.
So then when you said you already knew you wanted to start a network and you owned the shows at the beginning, did that mean you were the host? You started one show and you're like, okay, I'm going to launch another show, which is tangential, but part of the horse community and whatever it may be. Or you're like, all right, I want to launch another show. Who am I going to pay as a host? And I'm just going to own the show and pay someone to talk about this. Like how did you go through that process?
All of that. All of that. Actually, I hosted the first couple of shows, but then started hosts that were good in their niches. When I first started, I wrote down 40 different niches that I knew we could probably do something with in the horse world. And my theory always was, I need to find the right... I'm a believer, and I think I'm the first one that said this at PodFest all those years ago, is they come for the content, stay for the host. And I knew that I had the right host. So it wasn't so much that I said, okay, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this breed of horses on this podcast. I always went, I found the host that's good at one of the things that was on my list of 40. So that's the next show we're going to do. I always went by the host first, targeted who were going to be good hosts. And we had them audition by coming on my show as a guest, not telling them. I always thought, wow, that person might be a good host. Let's have them on as a guest, see how they do. And then I went back to them after and said, hey, you did great. Would you consider doing this? So I always had them on as a guest as an audition.
All right.
We
I
still
think
do that,
everyone
actually.
listen to that. Like that is you're the first person who's saying it's like, I used my show as an audition to figure out who would be the host for a new show, already knowing I needed more shows in my network. Like that's pretty smart, Glenn. I don't think
Well,
anyone else is thinking that way.
really? Because I always thought that was just a logical thing to do, because if they're not a good guest, they're not going to be a good host, you know? And also, I think you know, and you know this, Greg, you've dealt with a ton of hosts over the time. You know in 2 minutes whether you like somebody. And I always said, if I hire hosts, they have to be somebody I can go on a cruise with and really enjoy being on the cruise with them. You know, that there's somebody you want to hang out with, have dinner with, and just be friends with. And that's what I always used for hiring all my hosts. And look, I've had many hosts that have been with us for 14, 15 years, and they're still doing it. So, I pride myself in picking good hosts, and it's partly because I just pick people I want to hang out with. And I figured that if they're personable enough, you know, certain things we can teach them, right? We can teach them certain things, but they have to be huggable. That's my term, actually, is they have to be huggable. The audience would love to hug them sometime. And if that's what makes a good host. Because again, come for the content, but they're not hanging around if they don't like the host.
Yeah, this is so true. So then you're looking at, you could find, I don't know horse breeds. But you're like, I could find 5 people to talk about a specific breed, but I want the person who, as you said, I want to go on a cruise with, I want to hug with, and that's going to be a good person that will end up. So then are you turning to that person and going, hey, I want you to start a show. Here's the show, and I'm going to pay you a flat fee to host it? Are you looking at it as, here's the rev share? Like, how did you even go about the conversation for bringing them into the 40 shows you knew you wanted to do?
Again, yes to all of that. So what I did is I just contacted them. We did pay a flat fee at the beginning, and it wasn't much, like $50 to $100, right? But we also offered them the opportunity to sell advertising to get a 25% commission on everything they sold, no matter what show that advertising ended up being on. So they might end up selling an advertiser that it was a better fit to go on a different show, but they still got commission on it. So that was motivation for them to do that. Then when Patreon came along, what we did is on the shows we owned, we told them, look, go out and promote Patreon. And we have about $3,000 a month coming into Patreon. And what we did was we said, we're going to take half of that money and divide it amongst the hosts too. So all the hosts got a portion of the Patreon money that came in every month. And the other portion we used for marketing. So that's how we allocated the Patreon money. It's still allocated that way even all these years later.
So it's not per show, it's per the network.
Per the network. We took all the hosts, divided it up equally, and they got an equal share. And it was just motivation, right? To encourage them to, encourage people to do Patreon. But also it was motivation. They all had a relationship with potential advertisers. A lot of them are professional writers, some weren't, but they all bought stuff and used stuff that could be a potential advertiser. So a lot of them were able to use that to get the advertisers onto their own show or a show on the network. And that really did help us grow. That was another thing too. When I looked at the potential hosts, I didn't look for, like if I was in show jumping, I wasn't looking for a professional show jumper to host the show. They're too busy. It would have been a problem. They might have been a good host, but they don't have time. So it didn't matter where they were in the levels. They just had to be likable and be able to do good interviews and not have a pretty good reputation. Like, I'm a horse husband. That's all I am. I've never trained a horse in my life. And I'm the voice of the horse world. Yet when we started, I looked at myself and said, I can't pretend to be anything else but a horse husband. And now, my tagline is America's Horse Husband. But my co-host is a really good horse trainer. And she's also personable and fun. And I say my co-host on Horses in the Morning. We're hitting 4,000 episodes, by the way, next month.
Amazing.
So she's terrific. And, she really does bring the horse knowledge. But I'm a better interviewer probably than she is. So that's, so we don't always look for the top of the field. You don't have to be the top of the field. You just have to be a good host.
So for anyone that's listening right now, it sounds like if they wanted to start a network, your approach, you would actually do that again in terms of find your niche, start a show, brand it as network, and then start finding other people that would make sense. And that's actually a great way to go about being able to monetize it. Because as you said, you already have in your mind each of your hosts who they can go sell to. but also the good content that you're able to create a network around. Is that a good way to look at it?
Yeah, and when I consult now with people starting networks, I tell them, look, you have one show branded under the network. Your website should be the network. Put the show underneath that. Because if you want two shows and maybe the second show doesn't happen for a year, that's fine. Who are you hurting by putting the bumper at the beginning that says it's part of the network, even though there's only one show? You're not hurting anybody, right? But what you're doing is building up in the listeners you do have, which are going to be your first listeners for the next show anyway. It's in their mind that it's part of this network. So then when you introduce another show, it's kind of just, it's just in their brain already. And then, of course, you'll start your all shows feed. That was one of the best things we did at the beginning, too. Every episode of every show goes out in the all shows feed. And so right now, that feed gets about 100 episodes a month. Do people listen to every episode? Of course not. But they're picking the ones they want, and they have the opportunity on the all shows feed. We have thousands of listeners on the all shows feed. So yeah, that was something that we did at the beginning too. It was hard to do back then, because you couldn't. It was just impossible to do. Now Captivate, makes that so easy. We don't do any extra steps. Back then, we had to post it everywhere. It was manual at that point.
Makes sense. And so then, from a monetization standpoint, you were paying out your host, paying them on the sponsorship side. Were they paying you to be part of this network? No.
And we did a different advertising model from the beginning. I was probably the first one to do this too, actually, is we did flat rate. CPM didn't make any sense for what we do because, my 1,000, 5,000 listeners for an episode are worth 10 times more if I'm not in a niche and just doing a general episode, right? Because, a saddle maker is going to want to come to a specific episode on a specific show, and that's going to be worth a lot more than $20 a thousand. So, we were able to charge hundreds of dollars for each ad when we, CPM-wise, would have been getting $20. And they saw results. So, I'll give you an example. My first advertiser, and this is another lesson, I went to her, did not know her, and we had the first show, about 6 months in, about 12 listeners, literally. And I went to her and said, podcasting is going to be a thing someday. Would you consider doing this? Well, I got lucky. I found the one person that had already listened to a podcast and liked podcasts. And she believed in it and became an advertiser for $50 an episode back then. And today, her company is our biggest advertiser on 4 or 5 different shows. She has not missed a week in 18 years. So, because she gets results and she sees the results she gets. She has never once, another lesson, never once asked me in those 18 years for download numbers. Not once, because she gets results. She doesn't care about the download numbers. She gets results. And that's the way we do our advertising, is we do it based on results. They see an uptick in traffic. Our listeners are really good about mentioning what show they listened to it on and where they found it. And they very vocal about, with the advertisers, letting them know where they heard it. So, they see, coupon codes work and they're working as well. So they see results, and very few of them ever ask for numbers.
So as a network operator with all the shows, but having done this for so long, what is the advice, or what is the guidance you were giving to the shows that you brought on, saying, hey, here's the education on how to properly talk about a sponsor? Like, I have to imagine to see results, you were teaching them, right?
Well, and it's all host-read ads. 90% of what we do is host-read ads. There are some ads that are pre-produced, and there are ads that are legally regulated, like it's a medicine or it's a supplement where every word is approved by the legal team. Okay, so those we don't have any choice on, right? But otherwise, we talk about just using the product, and we, in almost every case, we have this potential sponsor send the product to the host. Just like YouTubers are the best at advertising, in my opinion. The good YouTubers, they can transition into an ad. You never even know they're doing it until they're about 30 seconds in. We as podcasters, I aspire to be as good as some of the YouTubers we watch. And a matter of fact, my wife and I will sit there and go, because she's worked with me all these years, we'll sit there and go, okay, they were 30 seconds in before we realized it was an ad. In my opinion, that's really good. And that's what we try and do too. And so we make the advertisements so that people want to listen to them. rather than have to listen to them.
You make it part of the content.
We make it part of the content, and we make it because we use the products. It's easy for us to. It's easier for us to do that, and we turn down sponsors. If we don't believe in the product or it doesn't work for us, they get turned down. We just won't advertise them.
So, what else is the model? Because, is it a website? Have you figured out articles? I mean, I can imagine you could have all these blog articles aggregated on a website with all this traffic, and then links to each of the podcasts that have to do with that article. If you figured out that model, is that at all part of, or it's all been strictly just the audio side of podcasting built into now to video?
I wish it was all of that, but it wasn't. It's all on the audio side. Now, when I sold to the bigger networks, which we'll talk about a little bit later, they have owned a bunch of magazines and things, but we still do it. We still rely on the show notes, and now more and more, as you know, show notes are being searchable. So, it's helping us out that way. But we always had really good SEO because what was important was those paragraphs or two that we put in the show notes and then the links. So many of our sponsors also said in the days when SEO was a thing before AI took over, they had more incoming links from us than anybody else, which also showed.
That's
they could
huge,
see that, right? And so we were very good about the links. We were very good about putting all of that in the show notes before people even knew how to find the show notes. That, obviously players have made that easier too. All of this was not easy back then, It wasn't. Today, all of this is so much easier than it was.
I mean, there's the plus side of having done this so long ago where it was a struggle, and you're like, all right, I'm an old timer. I see where things are today. But at the same time, because you did it so long ago and you stayed consistent, like you said, 4,000 episodes, you were able to sell your network, build the network the way you did, and someone else didn't come along and do it.
Well, and the other thing, too, is we were consistent. Because we had sponsors from the beginning, we had to do episodes. We couldn't just skip or take a break, right? Because they were paying for those episodes. So we had to be consistent from day one. I never knew anything different. I never heard of seasons till 10 years. I didn't know what a season was. So just because they were paying for their sponsorship, and some shows had 4 advertisers in an episode. That's the most we would do in an hour. So we had to do the shows. And if a host couldn't make it, I filled in. If one of the hosts for one of the shows that I didn't even do couldn't make it, then my wife or I filled in. There was an episode that went out because we were contractually obligated to do it. We didn't have the luxury of saying, okay, this week we can skip it. We didn't have that luxury.
Makes complete sense. Would you do seasons now if you look at it, now that you know what seasons are? No.
We discussed that on my show today on Horses in the Morning. It came up, and my co-host came from traditional radio. She was top 40 radio doing morning drive for 10 years in Atlanta, and came to me and took a massive pay cut to do our show, but she wanted to talk about horses. And she said, I didn't even know what seasons were. So having done a daily show for 16 years, we wouldn't know what that was. We kind of like doing the show.
There you go. Would you guide people? I mean, you guys wouldn't, but would you think it's a decent idea to do seasons, marketing, packaging, advertising it?
We've never done it. I'm not against it. We have never done it. One of the things I've seen from the people I've dealt with that did seasons is they tend to quit quicker because it's easier not to restart than it is to keep going, right? Some people do seasons and do it very well. I think there's a certain show that you're doing a murder show, a murder podcast. You're covering one murder for a season, and you can take a break before the next season. That kind of makes sense. But with the kind of thing we're doing, we're covering a discipline or a sport, it would be much harder to take a break, I think.
Makes complete sense. So you mentioned from a network standpoint, having the one feed with the 100 shows in it. From a technological operational side, what else goes into a podcast network that you guys have over 20 years here figured out and continue to leverage?
We run it lean. We do most of the shows, the hosts will do their own recording, and then it gets sent over to us for editing. We have editors that do that. I still edit some of the shows, believe it or not. And we bring it in-house, then we edit, produce, and publish the shows. The hosts then are partly responsible for the marketing. But what I always wanted the host to do was worry about the content, was make the content good, and then we'll worry about everything else. So even on the shows that we don't own, we still can have a say. If the episode comes in and we don't like something in it, we have it in the contract that we can tell them to remove it. So we've kept ourselves out of hot water legally a lot of times that way. When there was something said that we didn't think was going to fly, we would have them remove it, and that's part of the contract that we can have them remove that. I think that's important in having control over your own network. Is because ultimately you are legally responsible for the shows that are on your network. Whatever the lawyers say, you're going to get sued too. It might get thrown out in court, but you're still going to be in court, right? You're still going to spend the money to be in court. We never wanted to be in that situation. So we did have control over the content, even if we don't legally own the show, but it's on the network. And, we've never really having an issue with that it's 5 minutes of this here we want to take out because it's defaming somebody, or it's a direct shot that we don't think is needed in this conversation, and they would take it out. So I think that's important too, is when it's in your name, when you own the LLC that owns the network, you're on the hook, and you do have to be concerned. I don't know how the political shows do it. I wouldn't have the stomach for it. We've always been kind of anti-political on our shows, period. We don't talk politics. So I don't know. It would be tougher for me to do that, I think.
Well, I'll have Gordon and Lindsay on at one point, but since you've opened up the Pandora's box of actually talking about the legal side, what should networks think about? And then from a podcaster standpoint, if I'm listening to this, what should I be concerned? Because one of the red flags that has come up is, do you have control over their content? And you're clearly saying you have control, but we have final say because of the legal side. So there's two sides to the coin here. Curious your take on both sides.
I think there are networks that do it both ways. Successfully do it both ways. So one thing about networks, we started something about 5 years ago called the Podcast Network Alliance.
Shout out Sonny and you. There you go.
Yeah, we started that years ago, and was basically up until recently, it was a group where we all got together and compared notes. Every month we'd get together and compare notes. Gordon, you've had Gordon on. He's appeared with us, and you've had several people on, Dan and everybody who's been on this show who are part of it. And it was just a way to learn. And what we learned is that every network, and as you're learning, and as your listeners are learning, every network is run differently. And is any of them correct? No. They're all correct, right? It's all the way you want to do it. We all do it a little bit differently, but it's what fits our niche, okay? Because our niche is going to be different than somebody else's niche. And it's what fits your comfort zone. What are you comfortable with? What to answer your question, we do have contracts with every host. We have contracts with every single sponsor. And the contracts do dictate exactly what's going to happen, who's going to do what. So if there's ever a question, it's in the contract. And we spent time making sure those contracts were right and updated and all that stuff. And that's kept us out of if everybody knows what the deal is going in, you don't have an issue, right? Everybody knows what the deal is going in. So if the show comes to us, and we've had a couple shows say, no, I don't want to be on the network, because we do have the ultimate say to take something out of the show. Very seldom does that happen, by the way. It doesn't happen often. Once a year, maybe. So it's not a problem because everybody understands what it is. I've seen networks start without contracts, and it's a nightmare. It will be a nightmare at some point because something's going to come up, and you're not going to have that legal document to back you up.
There you go. So if you're listening and you are starting a network or thinking of starting a network, get the legal, cross your I's, or what is it? Cross your T's, dot your I's. Yep. And if you are...
Everything has to be contracted from day one. And then there's no question. And if you have a partner, for certain that has to be contracted with them. Yeah. But how many times have we seen that go south? Partnerships.
Plenty. Yep.
Yeah.
So moving from the legal side of it, which then allowed you then to sell it, what is that process like? If anyone here is listening, I would love, I actually had a voice note that was sent to me the other day saying, hey, I have a network. Now I think they should try and sell it, but they're going to try and do something with it right now and hold on. But where do they even start? How do you even go down that path of trying to sell it?
Well, the first thing you do is when the day you start, you do everything thinking you're going to sell it someday. So that means you have the books in order. You have everything you do, like all those contracts in order, because everything gets looked at when you go to sell it. That's all going to be put under a microscope. So having everything in order, and I always had in mind that I wanted to sell it. That was from day one, when none of us knew what we were doing. I just thought someday podcasting is going to become a thing and somebody's actually going to want this. I was just praying that would happen. And so what happened to me is I got cancer in 2020 during COVID, and I had surgery and all that stuff and had complications and all that. And I got to the end of that in 2021 and said, look, it's time for me to start thinking about selling it. So what I did, I always knew who my target was going to be. That's the other thing. As you're going along the way and you're developing relationships in your niche, I developed a lot of relationships in my niche. And we have interviewed over 15,000 people on our shows. So 15,000 people knew who we were. On Horses in the Morning alone, we've interviewed over 7,000 people. So people know who we are, and that's more important than you knowing who they are, right? Everybody knew who we were that was in the business side of the horse world, and especially the media side. They all knew because I went to all the media conferences. I spoke at them, all the media conferences for the horse world I went to. And so what I did is contact the big media players, the people who owned video and magazines in the horse world. There were 3 big ones, and I contacted all 3. And I was in negotiations with the first 2. And then I went to a conference called the American Horse Publications. That's where, for people watching, this comes in. I just got this one. I went and in 2021, I sat down at breakfast, and I just happened to have a conversation with somebody I knew. She was a journalist, an editor of one of the magazines, and I said about maybe selling, and she said, don't move. She went outside, came back in 15 minutes later, and said, you have an appointment with my boss on Wednesday. You're going to talk to him before you sell. And that was the people at Equine Network. I talked to them. They were the best offer. So at that point, I hired a really good mergers and acquisitions lawyer, and that's a key. You need a really good, not a family lawyer, a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. So I hired a good one of those, and he was fantastic. When you get the first offer in writing, it was 100 pages. For my little company, it was 100 pages. And I had done legal documents all my life in all my businesses, and I didn't understand half of this one. It's a completely different ballgame. So that's your first piece of advice. Do not try and even do this yourself, because their lawyers will eat you alive. There's terminology in there that, when I sent it to my lawyer, that first draft, he redlined half of that, about 50 pages of it. And I said, well, they're never going to accept this. He said, no, this is normal. He said, if I don't do this, they're going to think we're a pushover. So we sent it back. They came back with like 3 things that they didn't agree with, and we negotiated those 3 things. But then the due diligence starts. I had to produce 90 different PDFs over the next 6 months. That was everything. That's where the download numbers and all of that, every single statistic you have, every financial thing you have has to be in order. And they take a look at the last 3 years in depth, and they want to know everything from the advertising, everything. Then they look at it and they nitpick it, and you go through that for 6 months. People have likened being bought out to getting a colonoscopy, and having had colon cancer, I know a lot about that too. And yes, they're about equal, I think. But when you're at the end of that 6 months and it's done, thanks to your lawyer, it got done, and you're at the closing, then it became worthwhile. Now, mine was half up front and half over 3 years, and I would continue running the network for the 3 years. That hardly ever works out for the principal to stay on that long after. But here I am 4 years later. We're even past that. I'm on a new contract now. It worked out with this group. Equine Network was fantastic to work with. They were great. It worked out great. And so I basically got half up front, half over the next 3 years. And now I don't run the network anymore. I hired my replacement and trained her, and she's fantastic, better than I ever was. And she's running the network. I am hosting Horses in the Morning. So now I get paid to host the daily show.
Now you're just done. You're under contract, like your normal 40. Yeah, exactly.
I'm on a host contract now. But people say I'm retired. Well, I still do 20 episodes a month, so that's not really retired, right? I mean, that's.
And you still edit.
This is the other thing, and it comes back to this award I held up. They give one of these away a year in the horse world. It's the Equine Industry Vision Award. And there's only been 25 ever given out in the history of the American Horse publications. And it's because I made relationships the whole time. I was out there visiting people, going to the conferences, going to the horse shows, and making friends with everybody in the horse world because I knew eventually that would pay off. And it did, because I was friends with the person I was sitting at breakfast with and the one who went out and made that call. So, people, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that's the key to business, right? So if you're looking at doing this and you're hiding in your basement and you're trying to build this huge network, it's not going to work. You need to be out there in front of all the people who are potential buyers of your network. They have to know who you are.
I mean, it's, as my mentor Rob says, it's not who you know, it's not who knows you, it's who knows what you know that matters. But you're also speaking my language, Glenn. I mean, anyone that's listened to any episode or you've made it to the beginning of my episode, you didn't skip, I believe life is about time relationships. Like, I network for a living. I'm out there, and you're proving that we already know this in the podcast world. So anyone that's listening probably knows this, but like, it is a relationship world. And if you are running a network, whether it's the advertisers you have to build the relationships with, the shows that you're creating, all of that matters. It just happens to be the right time. And you got lucky on that right time of saying that too. And which I think is also what we learned from podcasting, vulnerability of like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this. Like, do I keep it to myself? When do I let people know that I'm thinking about doing this? And that's kind of the joys of podcasting. Like, it's all kind of aired out there.
I think in my case, I was thrown a situation, right? Cancer kind of made me realize that I need to cut my 100-hour weeks back. So now at least I'm back to 40, right? So, but it really was the motivation. But then everybody has that one trigger usually. That's why when they're going to the point where, okay, I can give up my baby now, right? Because it is our baby. And, for those of us that started in podcasting in the beginning, it truly is our babies because we birthed this thing and, figured it out along the way. All of us did as a collective. We kind of made it what it is today. So yeah, but I think there's a catalyst. There's always something you have in your mind you want to do it, but then there's something that sent you over the edge where you have the guts to do it.
Makes sense. One thing I want to come back to that kind of came to mind is if I think about some of my other shows that I've talked to network operators, one thing that kind of comes up is it's so easy for most people to do a podcast. And so some of the shows that may be sponsoring you, maybe like, you know what, we're just going to go do this. We're going to create our own show and have our own and operate it, branded by us, instead of being under your guise. What's your experience in that? What's your thoughts on that, especially now when it is relatively easy, but there's the value, of course, of joining a network?
We always, and I'm a little different on this one, and I don't know that anybody's going to like my answer, but we always thought if a host is doing a show and they don't want to be here anymore, then I don't want them here anymore, right? And if they want to take what they've built and go away with it, we have it in our contract that they can actually do that. We own the rights to have it on our network for a year, but they can take the brand and go away with it and do it on their own. And we've only had 2 in the entire time do that. And one is very successful. And I'm happy for her. I saw her at the conference I was at where I got the award. And she's been very successful with it. And she got to start, with me. I hosted some episodes with her. And that's great. It's better for podcasting. It's better for podcasting in a niche that there's more of us that are teaching people how to listen. And she actually, because of her, a lot of people came to me, and because of me, a lot of people went to her. So we were, it was truly the rise, the water's rising. We're all rising with it. It was true there. So I think being in a niche like ours is a little bit different than having a general show. I can't really speak to general networks because I don't have one and I never had one. I'm in a very selective niche where, everything is about horses. It's a broad niche and there's a lot of money in this niche. It's not a poor niche either. There's a lot of money in the horse world. So, but I always said, look, and it's in the contract, if they want to take it and take the hosting away and transfer the show, that's fine. We had 2 that did, and one didn't make it and one did.
Makes sense. When I think about it, yeah, you are a unique niche, but like you could be the marketing network and think about
It could be hiking. It could be tennis. It could be any of those. Right. Yeah. Any sport.
Wilson decided instead of sponsoring a network of sports shows, they're going to start their own show. And you're like, well, they want that sponsor, and that kind of sucks. But
we had that happen a time or two, too. And guess what? They came back because their show failed.
And I think that's it, the power of the network. It's like, look, we have the establishment, the reach, we have the volume, we have the audience. Yeah, you can go do this, but you're starting from scratch. So there's something to be said about having a network.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
If you were to start this over again, is there anything that you would be doing different now that we're recording this in 2020, midway through 2026? What would you do differently if you were to start a network today?
I would have hired smarter people sooner.
In what regards?
Just every regard. We all, when we start, with bootstrings, we never had a loan or anything to do any of this, right? So it was all our own money. And you try and do it all yourself because you're trying to save money. I would have hired sooner. But as we all know, you always need your next employee before you can afford them, right? That's just the nature of being an entrepreneur. Right. But I would have done it sooner. I think that would be something I would do now, is like social media would be an area now. I wouldn't start a network without having a savvy social media person now, whereas social media was just coming up when we started. Facebook had just started and Twitter was just beginning, and all of that was just beginning. So I think right now I would start with a different group than I started with back then.
Who would be your first hire if you were starting a network today?
Oh, I'd hire the girl I hired to replace me at Equine Network. I'd steal her in a minute. She's terrific.
I mean, from a role standpoint, you mentioned social, so
she's kind of the social, but she also handles the sponsorships. Sponsorships, when you get enough of them, are a time suck, right? Because
I get it.
You're constantly dealing with what commercials are going to be coming up, and the host. You have to make sure the hosts. It's just a time suck. Everything we do is time's our enemy. It's not money usually. It's time is our enemy. And so I think that having two people, one, social media, and two, sponsor relations, not even sponsor sales so much as sponsor relations, because that relationship, the person that's dealing with them every day with that constant influx of information and banner ads and, what we're changing the ad this week and all of that, that's all takes time, and if it gets screwed up, you've lost your sponsor. So those two people, I think, are very important for a network. Is your social media person who also assists the host in doing it right, and then also your sponsor liaison.
It's funny you say that. It's not so much the sponsorship person, but the liaison. I mean, having been in sales and media sales for the most of my career, I can go like, great. It's hard for me to go sell, but if I didn't have the best account manager who was managing, in a sense, the relationship, the trafficking, hey, how do we make sure everything, here's your reporting, which I was not doing, is that those campaigns, that relationship would not have been as good as it was.
And that makes you a good salesperson. I've been a salesperson for 40 years. Good salespeople are terrible after the sale. We make the sale, but I was in financial sales. It'd take me a week to fill out the application. I didn't get paid till I fill out the application. It still took me a week. And so I think that's two different mindsets. I think there's the mindset of the seller and then the mindset of the person who's really good at the lists and, keeping track of it all. And I think we're two different groups. And I should have had that person sooner. I think that was a mistake.
You've heard it from Glenn. Anyone listening, that is have a good social person and have a good person who's going to be able to manage, especially, I guess I should preface, if you are in the monetization of ads, like that is the person you need. If you are a network and that's not your core, then that would probably not be the role that you would be looking at.
Yeah, I agree.
What role if I wasn't focused on monetization, what would it be a good editor? I mean, if we look at editing nowadays, like you're the editor, but like, am I going to teach myself? Like if I were to start a network, I don't even know how to edit. So I'd be the salesperson, which we think about how many networks are started because of sales. And they're like, great, I could bring these shows together. So that's what I love about every network's being different.
And, some networks, the hosts do their own editing. and the shows are just on the network, right? So it depends on the type of network. And we you know, in the Podcast Network Alliance, we do have networks that are all independent shows basically that come onto the network, and they sell the advertising. That's the deal, and cross promotion and all of that you get from being on a network. And then we have a lot that are actually own all the shows, and they run everything, and they edit everything, and they pay the hosts. And then we have some like mine that are a conglomeration of both, where we own some shows and we don't own some shows. So it just depends. The salesperson is the interesting thing too, because if you're running a network in a niche, at some point they're looking at the principals. They're looking at the person who's the figurehead of the network. And usually the figurehead of a network in a niche like mine will also be the host of one of the most popular shows. That usually goes hand in hand in this situation. And so they're going to want to talk to you at some point. So I do think that even being entrepreneurial isn't enough. You also have to be a pretty good salesperson, because nobody's going to sell it like you're going to sell it. You can hire salespeople underneath you, but you still should be the best salesperson in my world, in the niche world.
Yeah. Spoken like two good salespeople here. There you go.
You know, I've been to 38 trade shows. That's where wholesalers meet retailers. 38 of them over that time. That's where all the sales were done, by the way. They're still done in person. I don't care what anybody says. 70% of my sales were because I met that person in person at their booth. And, you know, maybe I met them 5 times in a row before they finally advertised, but I was there every time. Now, by the way, my wife and I host the podcast for that trade show. We're their hosts. So now we're interviewing all those same people we've met 38 times over the years. So it all comes around, right? It's all and that partly is being a good salesperson. And you're selling yourself no matter what you're doing. We're all in sales. Right? Yep. You're selling to get a sponsor to make money somehow, to buy the book, to buy the course, whatever it is. But you're also selling in a way to get a listener to want to listen to you again. That's also sales. Nobody looks at it that way, but it is, right? If they don't like you, they're not coming back. So you're selling you, which is the hardest thing to sell.
Sales versus marketing. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
It's two completely different things.
Yeah. Well, as we get ready to wrap up, a couple last questions here. The standard, we know podcasting is incredibly difficult and discovery is difficult. So I always like to know, what's one show that you would love to give a call out that more people should be listening to?
Well, it'd be mine, of course. I'm a good salesperson.
Besides yours, we already talked about yours. What's another one?
Do you mean another podcast outside the horse world?
Yeah. Or it could be inside the horse world. I have no clue who's listening and if they're like, I'm a horse person, right? It could be just anything. But we've already given your show on the Horse Network. So what's another show?
Another show I like, and I'm not a hiker, but I listen to a show about hiking. And it's done by my friend Steve Adams. And I've listened to him from episode 1. And it's Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail is the name of the podcast. And I have never hiked a day in my life, but I love listening to that show about these hikers who spend 6 months in the woods. And I've honestly listened to all 500 of his episodes.
Wow.
From day one. And why do I listen to it? I have nothing in common with it. It's because, one, I like him, and I like how he helps the guests tell the stories. So there you go.
There you go. I'm going to have to listen to that. I love hiking. So there you go. The next one is, I was literally just, we're recording this. I'll date it, but we're recording this around the World Cup time. And so I was texting with Ryan Berman, who's the book I've got behind me, because he did the Landon Donovan's memoir. But we always say, everyone complains about there being too many podcasts, and no one complains about too many books. So I always like to turn the question of going what's one book that you would recommend to people? Because we don't complain about it, but might as well recommend them.
You know what? I have not read a motivational business book in 20 years.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I have not done that. So I've read a lot of books.
It doesn't have to be motivation. It could be anything. It could be fiction. It could be a kid's book. It's any book that you would, because just like you recommended a hiking, and you don't hike, it's the same concept. Everyone's complaining that there's too many podcasts, which you and I both know, and most people probably listening know and disagree. There's not, and no one complains that there's too many books. So great. If we're going to have this comparison, here's a recommendation of a podcast and here's a recommendation of a book, have nothing to do with anything besides what you would recommend.
If you're in the horse world, I'll give you the latest one I read. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're in the horse world, there's a series called the Cat and Wright series. It's murder mysteries in the horse world. And actually, it's one of my hosts that eventually became my host, actually, Lisa Wysocki, who writes all those books. And so she put in her time. She wrote 5 of those books in that series, and now just got picked up for a major movie, and they just filmed it last month.
Wow.
So major movie. There must have been 60 people on set. I had the opportunity to be on set one day, and so her last book is the one I just read. Horses in the Morning have been in 5 of her books, and we're apparently in the next book also. So, unfortunately, we didn't make the movie. I don't know why that didn't happen, but I have to talk to her about that.
You're like, I
love
need
her
credits
series
here.
of books.
I need my SAG card. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. Never got it.
Oh man. Well, speaking of movies, I guess we'll round out. Where are you excited in 2026 in the future, in the next few years in podcasting? I
think it's flushing out. I think we got all of the people, the 4 million who came in COVID time and thought it was easy. And I think we've gotten past now the people who are thinking it's easy and quitting in 7 episodes. We're still going to have those, but I think the volume of those is decreasing, right? And I think now we're getting people who are coming in who are more serious about it. And I think that's because I think those people that thought it was easy are gone now. And so I'm thinking really good things. One, technology, it is easier to do now than it was back when I started. But, it still comes down to the same thing it's always been. Some of this hasn't ever changed. Are you passionate enough? Are you willing to put in the hours? Are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to be consistent? Are you willing to do all of those things, right? And are you willing to get yourself out there to be found? I think it's harder now to be found because there is more clutter than there was in the past. So it's harder for Horses in the Morning to be found when there's 200 horse shows online, when we were the only one for a long time. So I think it is harder to be found, but it also, I do know that by hanging out for 4,000 episodes, people have found us, right? Because we still were popping up at the top because we've been around the longest. And so I'm excited about the quality that is to come. And I'm not talking quality of sound. Our sound has always been crap, and it doesn't matter. It matters a little, but it matters more now than it did in the beginning. But 90% of our guests are still on the phone. They're in the barn. They have terrible internet connections or no internet. So it's better to have them on the phone and clean it up later, right? Thank God for Alphonic. I'm just excited about the quality of shows that are being produced now over what we did, even mine back when.
That's a good way to end this, Mark. So, Glenn, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. It's always fun talking about this stuff.
I would agree. That's why I started a show for it.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks a lot. Well, you've made it this far, and I really appreciate it. I truly do. I mean, let's be honest. Most of us don't make it towards the end of a podcast. So if you give me a few extra minutes here, let me share my thoughts about this conversation with Glenn. At the start, he brought up this idea of labeling your first podcast as a network, even if it's just one show. That early network branding and the way it sets the foundation for future shows really struck me. Besides that, there are a few other things that I walked away from this conversation. First, the contracts, the legal structure. Glenn made it clear every host, every sponsor gets a contract with clear terms, including the network's right to request edits for legal or reputational reasons. It's not glamorous, and it's not what most creators think first, but it's probably why they avoided the explosions that hit other networks. Most people assume it's all about marketing, but a smart contract is shaping your downside too. Second, I'm all about relationships. We know that is my thing, and that's why I clearly vibed with Glenn's role on relationships. The kind that aren't just networking, but long-term, mutual, regular contact across a whole niche. Glenn went to conferences, met the players, became a familiar face. And when it came time to sell, it wasn't a cold call that made the deal happen. It was a breakfast at the right table with someone who knew him and was willing to make the introduction. That's not how most operators approach growth. And it's not a short-term tactic. It's a series of small deposits over years. To me, that changes how you think about a network really is. Not just assets, but reputation and trust. Third thing, I didn't expect the emphasis Glenn put on a huggable host. I don't know about you, but we have to smile. Huggable host. But people remember the show and the host that feels approachable and genuine. That's what I hope to do. And that has a business impact. You can't measure that in CPMs. It makes you reconsider what you actually want from a host. If you're building a network, maybe not just fame, but familiarity. There's a lot to sit in there, and I'm really curious what you thought from this conversation. So please reach out. Once again, thank you for tuning in. To those that have rated, reviewed, subscribed, I appreciate it. All of you that have sent me comments, it really means that this platform is working and the conversations we're having are having a lasting impact. As I say, life is about time and relationships. You have no clue where one conversation is going to take you. This is why I'm able to have this show and provide you these great conversations. This is why I love networking. You have no clue where listening to these conversations will take you now or in the future. But I can guarantee you your future self will thank you for tuning in. I live on LinkedIn. Reach out, connect, let's talk. To those who've already done so, I appreciate it. That means the world to me. I have a newsletter. Podcasting discovery is incredibly difficult. You'll find it in my LinkedIn. I put these recommendations for my guest in there, as well as every Monday, a post about other podcasts. Have one, reach out, let me review it. Subscribe where you listen. New episodes come out every Thursday, wherever you consume your podcast. Until next time, I appreciate you.